guys, Mr. Edwards here, Centreville High School Automotive Technology. Today we're working on our 1996 Toyota Camry. We're going to be putting new rear sway bar links and sway bar bushings on it. Let's go ahead to the back of the car and take a look at what we're working on. Okay, so back here on the back of the car at my rear strut where it bolts up to the rear knuckle, my sway bar link bolts up to the strut and then it bolts up to the sway bar, which is down there on the bottom. The sway bar is this black piece right here that goes all the way across the car and then bolts up to the other strut. What the sway bar does, there's one on the front and the back, it prevents the car from leaning too much when you go around a corner. Without a stabilizer bar or sway bar, the car could lean too much and potentially roll over, especially cars with higher centers of gravity like SUVs and trucks. But all cars, modern cars, have sway bars. These links right here on the top and bottom have a nut that goes into them like this and a ball and socket joint on the back that can wear out over time. If these wear out, they'll make horrible clunking noises as you're going down the road. That's why we're replacing these. So to get these off, I need to take this nut off here on the top and another one on the bottom that's very similar to it. If we're lucky, we can just put an impact gun on here, looks like maybe about a 14 millimeter, and blast it straight off. If we're not lucky, the whole thing's going to spin inside of itself inside that ball and socket joint, and we're going to have to use a pair of vice grips back here to hold it while we take this nut off. Let's see what happens. So I've got my impact gun on it here. It's a 14 millimeter. We'll see what happens. Yep, the whole thing wants to spin. See, as I'm loosening, the nut's not coming off any further. So I need to get a pair of vice grips and hold the back of it. So I've got a pair of small vice grips here that I'm going to adjust, and I'm clamping it just behind where the sway bar link goes through the bracket on the strut. Adjust them, clamp them tight. Now, hopefully, we can spin this nut off of here. Just like that. Sway bar link off, out of the way. Now I need to come down here to the bottom ball and socket joint on the sway bar link and get it from the inside to get that nut off. These can be tricky to access. This car is actually relatively easy to get because I can actually get my impact gun inside of here. Some cars are a real pain. Make sure I'm on loosen, and hopefully this one just spins off. If not, we're gonna have to grab it with the vice grips again. Oh, I need my vice grips. So I'll come in here, get that clamped on there, and we'll see what happens. Sway bar link is off. So we got our sway bar link off the back of the strut and off of the sway bar. Now if you come in front of the strut here, my sway bar itself comes up and then turns where it goes across the car to the other side. Right here, this is what's called the sway bar bushing. It's actually a rubber bushing that insulates the sway bar so that it's held in place and does its job. These rubber bushings wear out over time. You can see there's kind of a gap between the sway bar itself and the bushing. And when they wear out, they can, again, cause some horrible clunking noises because the whole sway bar can move around inside of them. We're going to go ahead and replace these as well. They're relatively easy to replace. You just have to take off these two bolts here, and then the whole sway bar will drop down, and we can pop that bushing off and put a new one on. So they are 12 millimeter bolts, and I'm going to come in here and break them loose with a ratchet and a socket. That's the front one. Come back here to the back one, same thing. And we'll grab a power tool to spin them the rest of the way out. This back one can be tricky to get to because of the angle that it's at, so I've got an extension on my battery ratchet here. Should make it a little bit easier. And then once these bolts are out, I'm going to pull this bracket down and I should just be able to pop this bushing off. just like that. Pull the bracket out of the way. And then this bushing has a split in the middle of it here. I should just be able to separate it like that, pop my bushing off. One thing, just a bit of personal experience I recommend you look at, especially if you're doing sway bar bushings like this. Right here where the bushing meets up with the sway bar, take a look at it. Make sure that it's still solid, you know, it's not rusted in half or anything, because water loves to collect around these bushings here. And because water can't get through rubber, rubber's not porous, it just sits there and it will rust out the sway bar itself completely through. I've seen that many times where you take a sway bar bushing off and half the sway bar falls off. So just take a look at that. This one's in good shape. It's solid. So I've got my new sway bar bushing here. It's got that same split in it. And new sway bar bushings, because they're brand new rubber, can be a little bit of a pain to get split to slide onto the sway bar at first. So I'm taking a flathead screwdriver here and prying it open a little bit to try and get it slid up around the sway bar. And with a little bit of wiggling, it'll pop up around there. We'll take our bracket now, flip it back around, put our bracket back around it, make sure that lines up good. Like that, and get our bolts lined back up. One thing to look at with this bracket here, it has this little key that it has to line up so that the bolts go in the correct place. Make sure that lines up and hooks back into place. So that's hooked back in there. Now I'm going to take my bolts and just start them always by hand, remember. We don't want to cross thread or damage anything. And once the bolts are both started, we'll come in here and get them tightened down good, and then finish them by hand. Put our new sway bar link on. Finish up the bolts by hand, just make sure they're good and tight. Don't need our sway bar falling off. Snug. Get back here with our extension for our back bolt because of the angle that it's at. And that one's tight too. Nice new sway bar bushing. Let's put our new sway bar link on. So I've got my new sway bar link here, and some sway bar links, when you get them on the back of the ball and socket joint part, there'll be a hole and you'll have a little thing that looks like a little tiny screw that you have to screw in there so that you can fill them up with grease. That's called a Zert fitting. These ones don't have that. To be honest, it's because they're cheap quality. They're sort of disposable parts, but they'll be good for a while. Get this car going down the road and being nice and safe. More expensive parts have, you know, service fittings on them so that they can last longer. So I'm going to come down here, slide it through just like that, put my nut on by hand, spin it down, and I'll get in here with my impact gun and tighten it up. The nuts on these new sway bar links are a 15 millimeter instead of a 14 for whatever reason. But get in here with my impact gun. Get them on there good and tight. That's not going anywhere. The nut's tight. I'm all good to go. Now let's get the top of the sway bar end link put back on. Get the ball and socket joint lined up. Like that. And you should just be able to tighten the nut back down on this. You shouldn't have to hold the back of it with vice grips again. It should only stick when you're removing it. We'll see if that takes place today. There we go. Good and tight. And then obviously over here on the other side of the back, we did the exact same thing. We replaced that sway bar link with a nice new one, and we replaced our sway bar bushings so that everything will be nice and quiet going down the road. Alright guys, so that's it. We got our new rear sway bar links and sway bar bushings put on the car. Everything's going to be nice and quiet and smooth going down the road now. We don't have to worry about any of the safety issues that we had previously. I hope you guys enjoyed watching the video, learned something from it. Make sure you fill out your reflection sheet that goes along with it. And I look forward to seeing you guys soon. Thanks for watching.